bizarre stories from the subscribers. Hello Leo Augusto, my name is Ariane. I'm 13 years old and this story happened when I was 5, when I was 8. Well, my cousins and I were on vacation and we used to spend it at my uncle's ranch. However, that year things were very different and we couldn't go there because he was traveling. We decided to spend the vacation at my grandfather's farm on my father's side. My grandfather wasn't a big fan of kids, and my father didn't have a close relationship with him. When we arrived at the farm, we noticed a trail that led into the forest in front of my grandfather's house. We got curious since we were fearless kids and weren't afraid of anything. At least that's what I thought at the time. When we entered the house, we noticed there was a different door with a window on the top part and a door on the bottom, but we didn't pay much attention to it. We spent the afternoon playing, exploring, and running around the place. Eventually, we came across the trail we had seen when we arrived there and decided to explore it. Driven by curiosity, we walked for about 10 minutes until we found a swing. A very old swing made from a tile, but it really fascinated us. We didn't care about how old it was and played until nightfall. When our parents called us, we had to leave. And that made me really sad since I didn't want to stop playing. We tried to convince them to let us keep playing a little longer, but they didn't give in because it was getting dark. So we went to our room, which had bunk beds, which meant someone would have to sleep on a mattress on the floor. Guess who? Me. I didn't really mind and went to sleep, but I woke up startled in the middle of the night and decided to go to the kitchen to get some water. That's when I remembered the swing and felt a strong urge to go back there. I already knew how to sneak out without being noticed. I put a chair in front of the door, opened the top part and jumped out. I ran back along the trail and reached the swing where I played for a while longer. Finally, I decided to sit and swing slowly. However, out of nowhere, I felt something pushing me up and the swing reached a frightening height. I couldn't get down, so I jumped off in fear. I ran along the trail that seemed endless when I started to hear footsteps behind me. I reached the door, but the chair was inside the house. The thing that was following me was getting closer. Then I fainted right there. When I woke up, it was already morning and I was on the mattress. I didn't know how I got there. Still half asleep, I went down to the kitchen. My grandfather looked at me strangely, pulled my arm and said, "Next time, I'll leave you outside. We have only one rule in this place. Never go outside at night because evil awakens at night."
I just wanted to play a little longer on the swing.
"Crazy girl, I'm going to talk to your father." I started begging my parents for us to leave. I didn't want to stay there anymore, and finally, after a few days, we left. Sometime later, I heard about a curse associated with that forest. It was said that the little boy was playing on the swing when some friends pushed him so high that he was thrown off and suffered serious injuries. He broke both his arms and his neck and ended up passing away. They said his spirit sought revenge and remained there. I don't believe in that version, but thank God I never went back to that place. Thank you for reading my story, Leo Augusto. Send a kiss to Mirasol, São Paulo. Hello, Leo Augusto. My name is Guilherme. I'm 14 years old, and I'm going to tell you a story from when I was 6. At that time, my mother used to wash our clothes in a pond. For those who don't know, a pond is a kind of reservoir or lagoon, usually created by damming water for various purposes, like irrigation or supply. Something mysterious happened in that pond because years before, 2 children and an adult had died there. But nobody really knew how it happened. One day my mother, my cousin's mother, and my best friend's mother decided to go to that pond. While they were washing clothes, we took the opportunity to bathe and play there. We were warned to be careful not to drown, right? We spent a good while swimming there and diving in every possible way. Then, at a certain moment, my cousin felt something grabbing her foot, making her scream a lot. She got out of the water so fast it didn't even take 3 seconds, Leo. That made me a bit uneasy, so I asked what was going on. She explained that something had grabbed her foot. At first I laughed, and so did my best friend. However, later, I also felt something grabbing my foot, which really scared me. I looked down and saw a blurry face in the water. I froze right away, and that made me run out of there. Pretty scary, right, Mo? But my friend was confused and asked me what had happened. I explained that I saw a face in the water, and he said it was probably just a fish that swam by, by my feet. I kept thinking, am I going crazy? I just saw a face right here in front of me underwater. And that feeling I had on my ankle wasn't something just brushing against me, it was holding me like a hand. Later, when our mothers finished washing the clothes, we left. When we were about 50 meters ahead, I felt a chill run down my spine. And I looked back, right? I saw the water move and spotted the head of a girl. That really scared me. I called everyone's attention, right, to look at the water. My mom said it was just the fish stirring up the water. I never went back to that place. My fear was that creature pulling me in and I'd sink into the depths. Bizarre stories from the subscribers. Hello, Leo Augusto, I'm Marcelinho, and I want to share a story that changed my life. I used to live in a house near a cemetery, and it all started when I got my dog, Tico Tico. On my 12th birthday, Tico Tico was free to explore the backyard. But something strange happened every night. Around 1 in the morning, I heard intense barking. Curious, I looked out my bedroom window to find out why my dog was barking so much, only seeing people passing by on the street. Worried, I told my father, but he insisted they were just workers returning home late.
But Dad, I think this is strange because when I looked at the gate, they seemed like people with no direction, walking slowly and dragging themselves.
That's how it is, son. Work does that to us. Let's do this. Why don't you have a glass of milk and get some rest for a while? Tomorrow I have to get up early. Good night, Champ. One night, Tico Tico's barking sounded different, like he was suffering. I decided to act and went to the gate. I saw the silhouette of a man grabbing my dog, and on impulse I looked for a stick to protect my friend. To my surprise, before I could find anything, Tico Tico came back, and he came back with a piece of the man in his mouth. From then on, I started keeping Tico Tico inside the house, in my room, to avoid that kind of problem. Are you crazy? What was the guy grabbing on my dog? The next morning, when I checked the backyard, I found the piece that Tico Tico had ripped off the man, and it looked like strange meat. And it gave off an unbearable smell. It seemed rotten. While we were having breakfast, I told my dad what happened and showed him what Tico Tico had ripped off the guy who was at the gate grabbing him. However, my dad just blamed it on some drunk who tried to mess with the dog. Hey son, can you get rid of that piece of meat, please? It stinks like hell and I'm trying to have my breakfast. Tico Tico must have stolen that from some neighbor's trash. So relax, kid. However, the following nights made me suspect something more sinister. Watching during the early morning, I noticed that other dogs in the neighborhood were also getting agitated. Until one night, I hid near a gate to see what was passing by there. I witnessed a man who looked more like a zombie sticking his hand into a manhole and pulling out a rat to eat. Another one appeared from the direction of the cemetery and started fighting with the one who had caught the rat, trying to eat as well. That's when I understood the dead would leave their graves at that time, man, to feed on living beings. A sinister discovery that changed my nights forever. I never left my dog outside at night again, man, because otherwise I might wake up and my little buddy wouldn't be here anymore, you know, man. My life was always peaceful in that house. I grew up exploring every corner and living without any major worries. The neighborhood was calm and chill, you know. However, everything changed when Mason moved into the neighborhood. He was a strange boy, a dark presence that hovered over our lives. Like the gray winter, nobody knew where he came from, but something about him deeply bothered me. We played together on the street once, and it was at that moment that I realized something was terribly wrong with Mason. While we were playing ball, out of nowhere he picked up a stone from the corner of the street and hit a bird that had landed on the power line. He grabbed the helpless creature writhing on the ground and devoured it raw, without any remorse. That was the last straw for me, and I decided to keep my distance from that lunatic. After that day, I stopped talking to him and went on with my life. There was no way to keep in touch with someone like that. I had a rabbit and I would always feed it in the backyard. There was a little house there with plenty of space for him to move around, surrounded by bars. However, one night I heard a strange noise coming from the backyard, but I didn't pay much attention. I thought it was just a branch falling from the trees and didn't think much of it. When I woke up the next day, I was about to leave the house to go to school when I remembered I needed to put food out for the rabbit. That's when I realized he wasn't there anymore. My rabbit had mysteriously disappeared. I was desperate and asked my parents if they had seen him. They denied it, with no signs of any animal having gotten in there. Everything was intact. I had to go to school anyway. With a heavy heart, I kept wondering where my little pet could be. Until recess time, when I went to have a snack, that's when I saw a crowd in the courtyard. And as I got closer, I realized it was Mason. I forgot to mention that he was studying at the same school. He was eating a bug and everyone was shocked by the scene. I got there late and only saw him licking his fingers. It was disgusting, man. Right away, I remembered that scene of him eating that tied up little bird. That's when I heard one of the students saying the following. I don't know how this crazy guy ate the rabbit alive. He didn't even fry or cook the animal. He just put it in his mouth. What? Had he stolen my rabbit? Why did he do that? I just remember running at him to attack him, but I got hit so hard I don't even remember what happened next. I only woke up in the infirmary with my head bandaged and hurting a lot. After that day, I never saw Mason again. The house he lived in was empty. I didn't even get a chance to confront him afterwards. I'll never forget my little rabbit devoured by that bastard. That criminal must have been the devil's child to eat an animal like that. Hello, Leo Augusto. My name is Arthur Guades and I am 15 years old. I'm a big fan. I live with my parents on a farm in the countryside of a small town in Rio Grande do Norte. I want to tell you about that amazing day when I spotted a very strange creature on our property. This happened during the 2022 holidays when my ox, Jaiton, started acting weird. He was very old and the leader of our herd. Then one day we noticed he had disappeared from the pen, and we had no idea where he could have hidden. Until one day my father found him in a remote area of the property. He was thin and visibly weak. We didn't know what had happened. When my father went to call the veterinarian to take care of him, suddenly Jailton stopped breathing. There was no more life in him. The great leader of the herd had reached his end. At that moment, all the cows in the pasture let out a sad moo. As if they were mourning his departure. It gave me goosebumps. Later, when my father went to transport his body, the cows followed as if it were a real procession. They were crying a lot. You could see it in the eyes of those animals, tears falling. Until my father reached the place where they buried our dead animals. It's a kind of cemetery on our farm. All the little animals we've had and lost are resting there. A few days later, my cousins and I got curious to see how Jailton's grave was. You know how it is, a child's curiosity has no limits. So we went there on horseback. That's when we came across a terrifying scene. Leo, Jailton's grave was open. The pile of dirt my father had put over his body was out again. And there was something moving inside like a strange animal. It looked like a dog, but much bigger. All black furry and with an X drawn on its forehead. He emerged from the dirty skeleton showing those huge sharp teeth. I threw my boot toward that creature to try to scare it away. Jailton's body didn't deserve to be desecrated, but it was too fast. In a second it got to where we were and bit the leg of the horse I was on. At that moment my animal jumped and I fell hard to the ground, man. That creature wouldn't let go of the leg. It was the most terrifying scene I've ever seen in my life. I managed to get on my cousin's horse and we went back home. My father went to the place later to see what had happened. And the horse was there, lying down, dried up and missing a leg. I felt guilty that this happened to him. That creature must have been the well-known chupacabra. It drains the animals and then eats the carcass. Since then, we've never had the courage to go back there. But every now and then we hear noises around the house.
And the animals get restless and scared.
I always think it's that bastard coming back to terrorize my animals. One night I was in the living room playing on my phone while my grandma was sleeping, when out of nowhere the hallway light started flickering. I got really scared and decided to hide under the blanket. Then suddenly I looked to the end of the hallway, right, and I saw a head staring at me. My heart almost jumped out of my chest from fear. My grandma was sleeping and so were the dogs. At that moment I felt like peeing, so I crawled to the bathroom under the blanket, right? After I finished peeing, I was coming back when out of nowhere my grandma started screaming.
Ah, Eluize, what is that?
She caught me coming back to the couch while I was crawling, covered up. I almost gave the old lady a heart attack. In the end, the head that was looking at me in the hallway was just a bench with a bag of medicine hanging on it. Hello, Leo Augusto. My name is Jose, and I want to share a story that happened to my mother a long time ago. She was hospitalized because she wasn't feeling well. She spent the day in bed, and when night came, a nurse went to her room to check on her, right? The nurse asked if my mother wanted to call the doctor. She agreed, and after a few hours, another nurse came and asked if my mother needed the doctor. My mother replied that the first nurse had already gone to call the doctor. But the new nurse said that no one had been there before. My mother was confused, but she ignored that fact. However, things started to get strange when, In the middle of the night, the first nurse reappeared and offered my mother some medicine, insisting it was to help her feel better. However, after taking the medication, her condition worsened considerably. She started feeling dizzy, had chills, and the numbness began to spread through her body. This wasn't right. Whatever that nurse gave my mother wasn't working. And where is that doctor who still hasn't arrived to check on the situation? Desperate and suspicious of the nurse's intentions, my mother made an impulsive decision to escape from the hospital even though she was weakened by the medication. She found the strength to get out of bed and, with difficulty, managed to escape from the hospital building. Years went by, and by a twist of fate, she had to pass by the place again. That's when she noticed something that made her freeze inside. At the place where the hospital used to be, there was a big sign that said morgue. The memory of that terrible night came back, and she realized she could have been the victim of something much darker than she imagined at the time. That discovery was disturbing. She never really knew what actually happened that night at the hospital. But the mere presence of the morgue there, where she was admitted, rekindled frightening memories and sent a chill down her spine. Wondering what could have happened if she hadn't run away that night.